Good morning, Facebook friends. Helen Arcantu here, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am so happy to have some time with you today. For those of us in the world of the YW, today is the last day of a week that we are a global movement that our national organization has organized called A Week Without Violence. And all the YWs across the country and around the world, because we are an international organization, have been promoting programming and opportunities to support survivors with the intent and really our global hope to end violence against women and girls. At the YWCA, we know that not all violence is acknowledged or respected to or responded to equally, and that some victims actually go unrecognized altogether. And that's why for 20 years, YWCA nationally has set aside this 1 week in October because we do want to raise awareness, elevate survivors' voices, and we want to make sure that policymakers understand these issues. And we have that collective goal across the country that centering survivors is key so that together we can end gender-based violence. So with that, I'm so proud today to have my friend and key collaborator for the YW on a recent project, Kirsten Branigan, joining us on YW TV to kind of close out this week with a really important conversation that is information we all should know and have, whether it's something that we will ourselves utilize or whether it's something that we should just know in case someone in our life is impacted. Statistically, we know that it is very likely that whether it's yourself or someone in your circle will need this information at some point. And so with that, she has been our partner at the YW in building awareness around gender issues and safety. And recently, she's been part of a major project that we launched last spring called Creating Safe Workplaces in New Jersey Politics. It was an educational training video, which we created for political campaign staff and staff of political offices to build awareness and to provide resources to those that are working in New Jersey politics because we want to keep them safe and free from sexual harassment and intimidation. And let me also say, as we are kind of days away from midterm elections, voting is important. Who we vote for is important. They are, it's very key in impacting our issues. Voting in New Jersey is actually happening now because you can be voting by mail and dropping off into key locations. But we know we want to see a change of the face of who we're voting for. We want to see more women in office. We want to see more people of color in office and more women of color in office. And part of being able to create that culture shift and change is really addressing this issue. They are very, very linked. And so that's why this has really been an important project for the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. And we were so grateful that Kirsten joined this effort along with our funder of the New Jersey State Bar Foundation to be able to make this project happen. But today we have, as I said, Kirsten with us. She is the managing partner at KS Branigan Law. I want to tell you a little bit about her. She established her firm 15 years ago, and she has been the driving force behind its growth and evolution. She is an experienced employment lawyer, investigator, and neutral, having exclusively practiced law for 25 years and serves as an arbitrator and a mediator as well for more than 10 years. Her practice is rooted in efforts to prevent, manage, and resolve employment conflicts through training, compliance training, audits, investigations, and alternative dispute resolution. Throughout her career, she's handled a broad array of employment matters, including harassment, discrimination, retaliation, whistleblowing, and breach of contract claims, and has litigated before state and federal courts as well as government agencies. She serves as an arbitrator on the employment panel with the American Arbitrators Association and a mediator on the AAA mediation panel. She's also a mom, a wife, an activist in her own right, very active in so many organizations, one of which I'm hoping we're going to talk about at the end when we tell you a little bit about a new program coming. But so, with that, Kirsten, tell us a little, one of the things that's really unique about your firm, and I know we're going to focus on the conversation around safer workplaces and centering around survivors, but I think it's important to provide the context of where you come to this discussion and what you bring to it, is you are a women-owned firm. And you have been a force really in this area of work. Can you talk a little bit about that piece of how this became a central focus for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just thrilled to be here talking to you, Helen, as always, and admire all the great work that the YW and you specifically do. And, excited to have this conversation and impart whatever I can to kind of help individuals who, might be going through issues that are difficult to navigate, as well as to, just talk more broadly about the challenges in this area, what can be done, to engage in steps forward to tackle these issues. For me, in having practiced for over 25 years, I know that the issues of harassment and discrimination and violence have been issues that have really been challenges in the workplace during the entirety of my career. And I know before I started practicing law. And it's just so frustrating to see that year after year, these challenges continue. And I think that one of the turning points, obviously 5 years ago, was the latest iteration of the hashtag #MeToo movement. And all of that happened as a result of that. And, certainly there was a lot of momentum there on the topic, and many things that hadn't taken place started to take place, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But, there are things that can be improved upon in this area. And I for one, refuse to accept that harassment or violence at work is something that people just have to accept as something that has to be dealt with, right? I mean, we should not. I feel as for me personally, you mentioned I'm a mom. I have 2 teenagers and a 10-year-old, and I certainly want them to enter workplaces that are bias-free and inclusive, and where respect is really prioritized, and they're not having to deal with some of the issues that have been going on in workplaces, whether it's in New Jersey politics or the full array of employment, or school environments is another place where it honestly starts. So that's really what my perspective is, and a lot of what we do through the firm currently is training in these areas in terms of prevention on these topics, as well as assisting organizations with navigating some of these issues. If they don't prevent them, then how to remediate them and take corrective action. So those are areas that we specifically focus on in our firm right now.
So, it's wonderful to hear someone who is focused in this work to say that we don't have to live like this. And I think for those that are, possibly watching today that are in the situation or know someone in the situation, part of breaking that hopelessness that comes with those situations is education and information and resources and understanding that there is something you can do. And that's what today is really all about, is really centering this discussion around our survivors and empowering them so that we can get them out of unsafe situations and into clearly a safer environment and a safer workplace. And as you said, and I just want to echo this, although we together worked on this Creating Safe Spaces in New Jersey Politics project, this information can be utilized, in a broad sense. And, this is, we may be giving some links here and resources that, you can outreach to if you're watching and you're in this situation, despite what environment, that you're in. So let's talk about workplaces and how can employers whether they're a small company or a big company, right? How can, and whether they're, New Jersey politics, as we stated, or a school, as you mentioned, how can employers create safer workplaces? Let's start with putting the onus on our employers. What can we and should we be doing?
Yeah, so employers absolutely have the duty to their employees to provide safe environments and to prevent them from being subjected to things like harassment and discrimination, retaliation, and violence. So there's a lot that employers can do, and some of them do it, but don't really commit to it, and it's just a bit of a window dressing. And then some don't even know that they have to do it, right? So, there's a lot that can be done. And the number one, or one of the many things that can be done is having effective policies where you're essentially saying, this is what we at whatever organization believe is how employees should be treated. They can't be subjected to certain things. And, that could be not only what the law prevents, right? Harassment based on a variety of protected categories, based on, in New Jersey, we have many: gender, race, national origin, religion, age, disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, the list goes on. But also beyond that, a lot of employers can more broadly protect against bullying type behavior, even if it's not based on protected conduct. So we don't tolerate incivility in the workplace. We want to promote a workplace that's filled with respect and civility, and that's our code of conduct. So if employers have those kinds of policies that state what the law requires, but then also go more broadly than that and say that they will not tolerate other action in the workplace that does not adhere to a certain code of conduct that the employer requires, those are two critical components: having those clear policies and having them be meaningful and not just, like I said, window dressing on a piece of paper. The second thing is education. So you and I worked on that video together. You know how passionate we are about education. And a lot of times people don't know what they don't know and really need to be told. I mean, some things are very easier to discern in this space, what's inappropriate, but a lot of people, especially if things have been tolerated for long periods of time, they may not know certain things that are not really appropriate, in a current workplace environment. So education is just critical, and education meaning truly education intended to educate, not just, again, having something that people go through the process where they check a box and say, okay, well, we trained our employees, but it's not really meaningful. So interactive, meaningful training, preferably live. And live can be live in person, live can be live via Zoom, but it allows for a dialogue on these issues and to really have people be able to go through specific fact scenarios, to talk about the law, to talk about examples and things that need to be clarified along the way. And most importantly, give them the opportunity to ask questions. Beyond that, there's also effective complaint procedures. If something does go wrong, offering your employees a multi-channel resource, right? Not just you go complain to one person, but giving employees the option of complaining to whomever they feel most comfortable. That's an important element. It's also important to require that the individuals in your organization escalate issues. So if they observe something and somebody doesn't complain, making sure that the leaders and the managers and the supervisors escalate that up to human resources or a legal department or whoever takes care of those issues. These are some things that employers can do. And then, of course, if somebody does come forward and complain, make sure that they're not retaliated against. Make sure that there's a prompt and thorough investigation, often by somebody who is impartial, which may mean they may have to go outside the organization to have somebody come in. That's a big part of what we often do. We go into organizations and investigate allegations of harassment, discrimination, etc. And then last, but certainly not least, is take corrective action. if there's a situation that has been found to be inappropriate in the workplace. And a lot of times people say that zero tolerance policies and taking action in all situations. And you can have a zero tolerance to not accepting behavior like this at work, but sometimes people interpret that to mean any instance leads to termination, and that's not really correct, right? And you really don't want that, because that then just creates a environment of fear. Sometimes there are teachable moments, and sometimes somebody does something and missteps, and maybe it doesn't result in a termination, but leads to a teachable moment and one-on-one training for that person. So making sure that you balance your corrective action, with understanding that not every situation is going to lead to termination. And, but of course, if termination is warranted, to make sure that you also take that kind of action and not just sweep it under the rug because it's, somebody at a high level or somebody who's, been protected in the organization, even though they're a bad actor. So there's a lot that employers can do if they're really committed to the issue. And unfortunately, what I've seen in my career is that employers will do a lot of what I've said, but it's more as just a protective, preventative matter if they get sued, and they do not always approach it with an eye toward meaningful prevention and education and remediation. It's just trying to check boxes to see what they could then use in defense if they get sued. And that's not to suggest all employers do that, but that is an area that can definitely be improved upon.
Well, I appreciate that detail because, sometimes people think that this is just like one thing you need to do, and that it isn't real from an employer perspective. It's a layered approach to really creating a safe workplace and a workplace where this is not tolerated, and that everyone in the organization understands that and feels that it's not just on paper, but that it's a culture that's been created that it's not tolerated. So when we do, I think one of the challenges for survivors, right, is that, again, feeling that they're all alone and that, that they don't know how to proceed because of fear. So let's talk about how other employees who may witness something happening in the workplace, it may not be happening directly to them, but they definitely are, watching something that doesn't feel right. How can they help support their fellow employee who they can see is being targeted?
Yeah, so fellow coworkers oftentimes are in a very difficult situation because they do witness things and they know it's not right and they want to speak out and they want to help, but they don't know what to do, or they are also afraid of some kind of backlash or retaliation. And the one thing to keep in mind is whether you yourself have an issue that you need to take action on because you're uncomfortable, especially if it's something that falls within the protections of the law, you can't be retaliated against, and neither can the people that come forward and support you as part of that process. So those are important things to keep in mind. Even though the law does say that, people nonetheless do fear coming forward. 3 out of 4 people don't even complain about harassment if they're subjected to it. So that was the latest statistics that the EEOC and its task force report, cited. And so it's not surprising to me because I see it all the time where people are afraid to come forward. So one of the big shifts in training that both the EEOC and New Jersey's Division on Civil Rights has stressed, and many other states throughout the country, is this important concept of bystander intervention, and making sure that if people see something, that they say something, and employers really need to promote that as part of their culture, as part of their training. And they could do that in a number of ways. They can encourage people, and they can also create a policy where it makes it mandatory that if anybody sees something inappropriate, they need to escalate it, even if they're not in a management position. And, it really does help if the individual is afraid to come forward and worried, and then has 3 or 4 other people willing to back them up and say, yeah, we saw this and we'll go in and support you. All of a sudden, that person is not out on a limb by themselves and worried about whether or not that is, it's a lonely place to be and a scary place to be, but they have the support of their colleagues. So intervening and supporting somebody who's going through this, and the support can also extend to just being there to talk to them about it and to be a friend or a resource, maybe. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about other resources out there. They may know somebody who's a lawyer, and that's oftentimes how people find lawyers, through friends and family and resources like that. So intervene, be a good bystander. If you see something, say something, and of course be there to support your colleague who's going through the difficult situation at work.
Well, that's a good list, and for those of us watching, I hope that we are making note of those ways that we can support our fellow employees. And whether you are that fellow employee who is trying to support your colleague, or whether you are the individual in the employment setting who is feeling unsafe and having an issue like this happen to you, let's talk about, first of all, what are some of the resources available and what should they do? Or maybe we should do it in the reverse. Let's start with what should they do, and then what are the resources available? Because knowing the resources, even if you're not going through it, are key to being supportive to someone in your work environment. And again, in your life, because it's statistically what we know is it's likely that whether it's you or someone around you, will be impacted in some way with one of these scenarios.
Yeah, so when somebody is subjected to harassment, unsafe conduct at work, one of the things that they want to think about is it a situation that they want to try to handle themselves directly with the person? And that's not to suggest that has to happen. One of the biggest reasons why people don't complain when other people make them feel uncomfortable is they don't want to get that person in trouble. That's actually a big factor that holds people back from moving forward. They may otherwise like the person, right? Everybody else seems to think the person is great and funny, but they cross boundaries with them and make them feel uncomfortable. Now this might be easier if it's not a supervisor and it's just a colleague, but communicating your boundaries, and it's okay to tell people that you find something's uncomfortable or you find offensive. And even if you're worried about verbalizing it, you could communicate your boundaries in other ways. You could shoot them a look. You could back off if they come in your personal space. And flinch. There are ways that you can communicate boundaries that don't always even require verbalization. Some people are not the type of people that would feel comfortable saying something like, hey, did you really just say that? Or I find that offensive, or I don't really appreciate that, something like that. Other people would feel completely comfortable saying things like that. So the first thing is to know yourself and know what your comfort level is. So if you're comfortable and the person there, especially if there's not a power imbalance, and not to say some people are fine, even if there is a power imbalance, calling somebody out, even if it's their supervisor. But sometimes people get wary if they're in a more subordinate role or if there's a power imbalance. So if you're comfortable stating your boundaries been crossed, absolutely state that. And if you're uncomfortable or you don't feel that you want to do that, because you don't have to, bring somebody else in from the organization. And that could be a supervisor or HR or somebody else who's designated as somebody to, listen to situations like that and take complaints and say that this made you feel uncomfortable, and that you want to figure out how to navigate it and you need help with it. So internally, organizations are often looking to find out what those issues are so that they can elevate them and fix them, before they spiral into something, which often happens because people will not complain because they're worried and all sorts of other issues. And then all of a sudden something explodes, and then it leads to outside intervention, legal action. And that's another, of course, resource. If you cannot fix something internally, or you've tried and the organization is just not willing, or is protecting the wrongdoer, or doesn't have a policy, or you don't know where to go to internally, then external resources might be your only choice. And that is also something. It could be going to one of the federal or state agencies. Within New Jersey, we have the Division on Civil Rights out of New Jersey. Other states, New York, every state usually has its own organization that deals with issues like discrimination, harassment. And then at the federal level, there's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And these are entities that essentially will look into situations, and you can file complaints with them. Sometimes those organizations can get overwhelmed with cases, and if you're not getting the kind of response that maybe you're looking for, or if you decide that it's just not the approach that you want to take, you can also contact an attorney. And that's where friends and family and other resources come in handy. You can do anything from reach out to local organizations like the county that you live in. The county bar associations have lists of attorneys in the practice areas that might be willing to do free consultations. There's also organizations like the New Jersey Women Lawyers Association that has a Find a Lawyer page, depending on practice areas. So sometimes you may get to a point where you have to reach out and go to an external resource because the internal processes are just not feasible. Or in a case like when we were discussing some challenges with New Jersey politics, if it's a very small office and the wrongdoer essentially is the politician that you're working for, and there's no internal process to go to, which is a big challenge. And one of the things that we talked at length about in the Creating Safe Spaces in New Jersey Politics video, you may have to go external if there's nobody who can handle it internally and assist. So those are options that are certainly there. But I've seen kind of the worst of the worst when these situations go bad and turn into lawsuits, and it's stressful for everybody involved. It's difficult for the company, it's expensive for the company, it's very stressful for the individual who went through it and is now having to relive it in a lawsuit. So obviously the sooner, the quicker that the issue can get resolved before it creates years and years of stress and emotional toll, creating emotional toll is, definitely advantageous.
And thank you for all of those resources. So our viewers have them. And again, this video stays on our page, so you can go back and watch again and write down, any of the details. We will put some links for you in the comments as well. I also want to make note that if you're looking, sometimes it's really helpful to, while you're kind of pursuing and trying to kind of ascertain who will be able to help you with the situation, you can always reach out to Healing Space, Bergen County Sexual Violence Resource Center at 201-487-2227. If you're not from Bergen County, that's fine. We'll connect you to the program within your county of where you live. And that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's an advocate that's trained in supporting survivors through these kinds of situations to be able to give you that kind of mental health support while you are going through and managing, figuring out how to address what's going on in your workplace. So please think about that. And also, I want to let you know that Healing Space, and very often some of the other programs in the state as well, does have an opportunity for someone to listen to. We have a program that's connected to legal advice to support you to be able to ask some questions. They wouldn't take on your case per se, but they would be able to help field your questions at no cost for our survivors connected to Healing Space. So that's also available. So please, consider reaching out for that. So I know, and time goes quickly when we are, talking about these important issues, especially, but I want to make sure that we tell our folks that are dealing with the situation or could be dealing with the situation, what are some of the laws that impact safe spaces at work? I mean, we talked about just wonderfully, you shared so many great entities that we can go to for resources, but there are laws out there that protect us and others that we really want to advocate for.
Yeah, so and I'm glad you brought up the healing space, and I tend to focus because I am an employment lawyer by trade. I focus on the entities that deal with employment disputes as opposed to all the wonderful organizations that deal with survivors and assisting with respect to those types of specific issues. So I know that when it comes to the legal perspective, I would not even begin to try to get into any of the criminal law impacts and protections, for survivors of sexual assault and, violence with respect to that. But as far as in the workplace conduct, if it's something that, and oftentimes somebody is assaulted at work. So it could be a combination of criminal laws that are implicated, but also civil laws, which typically are the type of laws that are going to govern workplaces. So in New Jersey, it's interesting because we have a body of case law from years and years, over 25 years, that basically provide all of these protections to employees at work and create these duties upon employers to prevent harassment and discrimination from occurring in the workplace, and then having to remediate it if it does. But there's no real clear statute in New Jersey, believe it or not, that prohibits this behavior. And we were at a place in the post Me Too era where many states were getting laws passed quickly. New Jersey took a very thoughtful approach and had hearings on ways that they can improve the laws with respect to harassment and discrimination in the workplace. And Helen, both of us testified at those hearings. We were so excited about the momentum because finally it looked like there were going to be some recommendations that we would here in New Jersey have clear statutory requirements that provide clarity for employers and employees as to what employers should be doing when it comes to prevention and remediation of this type of conduct. And the report got issued February 2020, right before the pandemic hit. So unfortunately, for the past couple of years, since the gears have shifted to pandemic emergency sort of response, that law has not passed. It's since been reintroduced into both the Assembly and the Senate. But the law, it does exist by way of common law, court created case law, but does not provide always the level of clarity that would be desired for employers, both large and small, to know what the requirements are. And this law that's currently pending, if passed, would provide the level of detail on what should be in policies, what should be in training programs, which employers would have to do live training, all employers in the state of New Jersey would have to do some degree of interactive training, regardless of size. And these are the kinds of things that would provide clarity and further enforce the protections that already exist. So that's really what's happening now in the space here in New Jersey. There are other laws that have gotten passed that have pertained to harassment in the workplace, like the non-disclosure, there used to be prohibitions on non-disclosure for harassment cases, and that was a law that was lifted after the Me Too movement, where now there can't be a requirement to have somebody not be able to talk about being subjected to some kind of harassment or discrimination. And there's actually a law pending now that just got, I believe it was passed in the Assembly just recently, but not in the Senate, that would pertain to non-disparagement provisions. Because oftentimes after a legal matter may settle as part of the agreement between the parties, there's a prohibition on non-disparagement or saying negative things about one another. So there's a law actually pending that would eliminate that and say that can't be required anymore. So that's just a little snippet because there's a lot to talk about there. But the most important part is the pending law that would statutorily require the prevention and remediation of harassment and discrimination.
Well, I thank you, and to our viewers, I want to say a couple things to you about what Kirsten just shared. One is should stay connected to the advocacy alerts that the YWCA of Northern New Jersey puts out, because we will let you know when there are important votes happening on these issues, so that you can reach out to your elected officials and let them know that these issues are important to you and how you want them to vote on it. I always say you need to remember, doesn't matter who you voted for, whoever ends up in office works for you. And you need to not only let them know how you feel on election day, you need to let them know how you feel on, every time an issue pops up, especially ones that are aligned, with your values and that are so important to you. So keep close watch, for sure. And I'm going to say it again, don't forget to get out there and vote, whether you're doing it on the 8th of November or whether you're doing it before, through the various ways that we have here in New Jersey to be able to do that. Who we have in office matters, and it directly impacts how issues like this are addressed. And it's imperative that we know the information that Kirsten is sharing in case we are impacted. But we also want to make sure that we are kind of getting ahead of this and getting some of those laws in place and making sure that we have people in office who care about these issues as well. So, Kirsten, I'm so grateful for all that you shared. I would be remiss in letting us end our time together without spotlighting a project that you also helped inspire for the YWCA. And hopefully, you mentioned the New Jersey Women Lawyers Association has become a first time for the YWCA, very specifically for a program around helping us encourage the girls in our network to consider law as a profession. And we are so excited about the launch of this program. And, we are spotlighting and partnering with the organization and key lawyers within the organization to help create this opportunity. So all of you should be watching our social media, and our alerts through email, so that you can think about connecting the young women in your life to this program. But we started out by saying that you are a woman-owned firm. Can we talk a little bit about how about the importance of getting more women in law?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I could just give you a whole other segment. I get definitely passionate about this, but I was, I was one of those people that a lot of people tried to talk out of going to law school. I didn't know a lot of lawyers and didn't have lawyers in my family. And I was inspired in my learning about women's history in college, about women being oppressed and considered property and not being able to enter contracts, and was inspired to learn the law of where I live. And obviously that was definitely a light bulb moment for me. And I think for any girls and young women that are interested in law, we absolutely need to have the voice of women, as well as other, underrepresented individuals in the law. And I'm so excited that this program is happening, and that New Jersey Women Lawyers is going to help support that. And it's an area that needs more women. When I was coming out of law school, there was about 50% of our class coming into the profession 25 plus years ago were women. And the feeling was that there would be a pipeline then of women to ascend into positions of leadership, and including into partnerships of the law firms. And unfortunately, the statistics have not shifted much. It's only been about 14% to 17% in 25 years, because often women are still faced with a lot of challenges within the legal profession. So we absolutely need a strong pipeline of young women coming into the profession and being a voice for a gender that is, often still fighting many challenges on many fronts. And I am just absolutely thrilled, and definitely happy to be my own boss and have my own practice. I have a great team, and would encourage any woman who's thinking of not only entering the practice, but maybe opening her own law firm, to do so and to certainly reach out. Be happy to help in any way and give some guidance. I, don't even know exactly the time that I decided to do that, but it was definitely the best decision of my life, in professionally, to start my own practice. So definitely passionate about that, as well as getting more women into the practice.
Well, thank you for helping me spotlight that conversation, because we're so excited about the partnership and the funding and now, the program in motion. And I also want to remind everybody that, we just had a woman that was put on the New Jersey Supreme Court, Rachel Weiner Apter. And that is the pipeline. We need to remember that our women lawyers do become our women judges. And it is really important, again, that we are, have more representation in both spaces. So we're so grateful and excited about the opportunity, to be pushing out this program and helping with that pipeline for the future. So folks, we're also going to put in the comments for you here the link to a town hall discussion that we did last week. Kirsten and I, along with a real talk about a dream team panel around this discussion of creating safe spaces in New Jersey politics that happened. And so we did host it live on Facebook, so some of you may have seen it, but we will put the link to that here as well. And so we do encourage you, now that you've watched this, part of YWTV's magic is, you then becoming part of helping share this important information out into the community. Make sure you tell your folks in your circle that could benefit from this information about this broadcast, and you can share it with them easily by either just sharing it from your Facebook page into a message, copy and paste, stick it into a text, in any way. So with that, we want to thank Kirsten for spending so much time with us today. I know that you've got a busy agenda that we pulled you away from, but this was so important and really, helped us close out the week without violence that is focused on centering survivors. This discussion truly did center around supporting survivors, and honestly, it should be a lifetime without violence for everyone, and that is really what we're working for here at the YW, and I know that's what Kirsten's working for as well in her work. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the great work you do.
Same. Thank you for always being up to being a partner and, joining forces with us on these important conversations. And for those of you watching, just want to make sure, again, stay connected to our social media, to our website, to Kirsten's social media, to her website. There's so many important opportunities for you to be able to get engaged in not only this conversation, but for the YW, especially other important programs for you and those in your circle, whether it's our program to, get some journaling skills to be able to help you elevate your voice, whether it's our YW TEP program that's coming up for a free workforce development program for women to kind of get their digital skills in better shape, or whether you want to join us tomorrow for the New Jersey Menstrual Equity Summit. We are at the YWCA a distribution site, so you can not only make donations for period care packages, you can also pick up supplies if you need them. And so we do encourage you to stay connected to our website to learn about all of those and so many other opportunities and events. And I would be remiss in not telling you to buy a ticket for our Walking the Talk Gala on November 1st at the Westmount Country Club. It's an opportunity for you to help support and celebrate all the great work that the YWCA is doing. Kirsten will be there, I'll be there, and we hope that you'll be there too. So everyone have a safe and wonderful weekend. Hopefully we'll see some of you at the Menstrual Equity Summit tomorrow in Newark, and everyone else, we'll see you on the next YWTV. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.